Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biohackers Lab. I'm your host, Gary Kerwin, and on today's episode, I have Alison Gannett. Alison is a self-sufficient farmer, a world champion extreme free skier, and she's also an amazing brain cancer survivor, which is why I've got her on the show today. Thank you so much, Alison, for coming on.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I was saying before we started recording how I knew you had a good story, but I didn't realize how good your story really was when I was doing my research on you. And so the real reason I wanted to speak to you was because you have managed to conquer brain cancer at this stage using a ketogenic diet. And your story is just amazing. So I think if we could maybe start anywhere, just with how you first figured out you actually have a problem like brain cancer.
Well, being an extreme free skier, I jump off cliffs for a living. I did notice that my depth perception was off. And when I was mountain biking, it also seemed strange. Like I couldn't tell the difference between 6-foot drop and like 6 inches. But I was thinking, oh, maybe I'm getting older. You make up a lot of excuses when things are going wrong. But one day, two big things happened. I had the biggest keynote presentation of my life for Microsoft in Las Vegas. And this was talking about skiing and conquering your dreams and all this stuff. I forgot to get on the plane. Then when I did get on the plane, I forgot to go to the presentation. When they finally dragged me up on stage, I don't even remember what I said. It's a miracle I didn't die that day. Somehow I got home, and then a couple days later, I was cooking bacon in the kitchen, and it caught on fire, and the flames were going up to the ceiling. And my husband walked in the door, and I was just sitting on the couch, and I was just mesmerized by the flames, and I wasn't doing anything. And for anybody who knows me, I'm kind of an overachiever, or I used to be. And so that was very strange for me to just sit down and watch anything happening. And it turns out I had some giant tumor. If you look at you can put a screenshot up there of the size of the tumor. It took up like almost my entire brain. It was like it was somewhere between an apple and a grapefruit when they took it out. And it was pressing on certain areas of my brain that were leading to the dysfunctions that I was experiencing. But it was really, really amazing that I was alive, period. What had happened was that it was starting to press on the 2 blood vessels that come into the brain. And once it does that, you basically just drop dead. And the other thing that was occurring is I was falling asleep while driving all the time. And I was kind of aware of it, but kind of not. And one time I was going over Red Mountain Pass on my way to Silverton, Colorado, and it's where people die all the time normally driving. And I was in a snowstorm, and I must have fallen asleep like 20 or 30 times. And I would wake up and not know how long I had been asleep. And the cliff was like 3,000 feet onto my side with no guardrail. So
wow, you are very, very lucky.
I'm a very, very fortunate person.
Yeah. So already there, I think that's such good information because people always assume, oh, if I've got a tumor, then I'm going to have a headache. And it's this terrible headache that's creating a tumor. But I
did have that too. But, you justify all these things that are happening to you. I see it all the time, I think it's just human nature that we think that we have to grow old and have aches and pains and headaches and lack of energy. And I think a lot of that is due to, our current chemical soup that we live in and, the food that we're eating. And I thought I was eating fantastically well. I was eating off our organic food. I was growing and raising all my own food when I actually got sick. But I had no idea, like I was eating what the USDA, the US government is saying that we should eat, many servings of whole grains and, all that stuff has sugar in it.
Yeah. So Yeah, because when I was doing my research on you, you said you've gone through lots of different diets, and we'll get to that point where, I mean, I would say you're a biohacker because you've got so much information just about yourself, and you tweaked so many parameters and watched what your blood work was doing, which was incredible. So I remember the one slide you showed, like, this is me on paleo, this is me on this diet. So you were saying when you first got diagnosed, you were on a typical diet, but a very organic diet because you were growing your own food. And then did you go straight into a ketogenic diet, or did you try lots of different diets before you got to a ketogenic diet?
I actually, I could probably blame a lot of my cancer on the fact that I was a carboholic most of my life, and I was a very poor eating vegetarian. For probably 15 years on or off, I was eating vegetarian. Then when I then I transitioned to organic in about 2009, which would have been about 4 years before cancer. I went all organic, grew and raised all my own food, including my own grains. And at that point, I got diagnosed, and I was like, well, obviously something's not going right here with what I think I should be eating. And I read Chris Carr's book, Crazy Sexy Cancer. So I immediately went vegan. And unbeknownst to me, the vegan diet that I was eating and that I see for most of my clients now is inadvertently not meaning to be high in natural sugars. So my blood sugar soared. I didn't know this. I didn't have a doctor at this point to guide me. I was kind of just grasping for straws on the internet because I was basically given a terminal malignant diagnosis, and I'm given a year to live with this type of cancer. And I knew that going the standard route and living 1 year through chemo and radiation and dying a horrible death was just not something I wanted to do. I wanted to do better than that. So after the vegan stint, I found my doctor, and that's Dr. Nasha Winters, and she's virtual. I call her more of like a conductor. Like, imagine all the players of all my neurologists and oncologists and massage folks and Reiki and EFT and, the whole team. That's the symphony. And Dr. Nasha is kind of the director up at the top. And she's fantastic. I did a 4-day workshop with her on cancer. And what immediately drew me to her was the fact that she's a biohacker. I mean, you would go crazy talking to her. She's nuts for data. And, my family was immediately like, well, what do you mean you're not going to do chemo and radiation? And I was like, here's the data online. If I do chemo and radiation, I'm going to live a shorter life than if I don't. So here's the statistics on that. And then I said, look at Dr. Nasha's approach with optimal terrain consulting. She basically has people with my diagnosis that are alive, 10, 20 years and doing great. And I loved her approach because it was looking at the root causes of cancer and then undoing them one at a time. And she has a phenomenal book that just came out called The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. And it really goes into the 10 different areas that most people that drive 99.9% of all our cancers today. And you just have to do some really cool sleuthing. And with her help, you look into labs and you look into DNA and you look into food sensitivities and hormones and thyroid. And, the list just keeps going and going. And after a while, I just was like, oh, this is just a big puzzle and you're putting the pieces together. And she's like, don't forget 2 things. Normal gave you cancer, so you don't want to have normal. And then, so we had to invent a new normal for me. And also no stone unturned, because a lot of people that I do diet consulting with, like I do ketogenic diet consulting now because I went back to school. I was so amazed that I was alive and doing so well. I was like, why not help other people? So I trained with Dr. Nasha. But a lot of people think like, oh, it's just the ketogenic diet and then I'm going to be cured. Cancer's not that simple.
Mm.
It's a layer. I think of it as an onion. And you peel off one layer of the onion, and you find another one, and then you find another one, and you find another one. And I did my initial consult with Dr. Nasha in 2013, just 2 months after I was diagnosed. And I am still working on her 75-page report that she gave me,
Wow.
and now it's almost 5 years later. So
yeah, so that's amazing. So because you got your diagnosis in 2013, was it?
Yep.
Okay, so I mean, just coming back to your story then, so you were there watching the fire, and your husband rushes you off to a hospital thinking something's wrong with my wife here, because he must have known about the Microsoft story too, saying you just bombed on the stage. You didn't quite know what was going on, or they had to.
Yeah, my family thought I was depressed, and we have a family history of migraines. So, my husband and I live alone on an 80-acre farm in the middle of nowhere. So not a lot of people were watching this odd behavior of mine.
Mm.
And so my husband thought that I was trying to get rid of him for some reason. And I was just trying to be super annoying and super unhelpful. And that way he would want to divorce me. I mean, we come up with a lot of weird stories when
we don't know
things go wrong.
And then, so you got rushed in, and immediately that day, was it, or that evening, they already had to do brain surgery on you to remove the tumor, was it? Or by the next day they rushed you in?
Well, the ER doctor was making jokes because I looked so normal. Truth be told, I don't remember being in the ER at all. So I was appearing normal, but I was virtually not there.
Mm.
And then the doctor comes back. I don't remember this. This is all stories from my husband. He has the CAT scan. And of course, the tumor takes up most of my brain, and, his whole face falls. And he hands the scan to my husband and says, well, bring her in on Monday and we'll get her, in with an oncologist or a neuro-oncologist. And my husband's like, come back on Monday. I mean, this looks like crazy. But they were planning to have surgery at my local hospital, which is a decent hospital, but my family knows enough about medicine and doing research on your doctors to be like, hey, brain surgery is really serious. It can kill you. And luckily my family, started calling everybody they knew that knew anybody that was a brain surgeon, started looking online, and we found 2 really good places to have surgery, either in Boston, Massachusetts, or in Aurora, Colorado. And so, unfortunately, I wasn't a prior patient for any of these doctors. And so the only solution we had was to drive to the ER at the doctor in Colorado. And my sister happened to call the doctor, and he actually called her back on a Sunday because he saw the CAT scan, and he was like, holy,
yeah.
He was like, okay, bring her here. She's not a patient. We're going to have her admitted in the ER, and then we're going to make her become my patient. And they actually put me on really high dose steroids for, I don't remember, a day or two, because the tumor was so engorged. Now, knowing what I know, that steroids can actually further the growth of cancer through driving blood sugars up, I would have taken something like Boswellia instead, or, there's a bunch of anti-swelling things to take. But anyway, I had the surgery. They got the primary tumor, most of it out, and they just left a little piece here, which I affectionately call Junior. And I was super upset about Junior for the first couple of years, actually. But now I just consider him my barometer. And anytime I want to cheat on the diet, which I really don't want to, it has to be delicious. So,
because I've seen the pictures of when you shared your scans, and when you said that brain surgeon said, oh my, because it is huge, and and it is a miracle to say that, wow, there was that mass was removed from your brain and you're still here today. Yeah, that's incredible.
It's insane. And now I hear all these tales of people having brain surgery and then having a lot of problems with either neuropathy or they can't smell, or they can't see correctly, or they can't hear correctly, or they have paralysis on one side. But luckily, the only thing I got is I have a new inability to not be able to spell.
Okay.
Which is brand new. I was never a good speller, but I'm not as bad as I am now.
Okay. Yeah. And so I was interested. So you had this removed, and then you chose not to do any chemotherapy or any radiotherapy after. So you just had the surgery to remove the mass, and that was it.
Well, they did the surgery, and they said, this is so invasive. We need you to go recover for 6 months because,
6 months.
Yeah,
wow.
They said, the surgery was so invasive, and they were worried about infection. They were worried about seizures. Most people I talk to aren't sent home for 6 months before and I think it's because in their mind, they got most of the primary tumor. And they were hoping that Junior was not another malignant tumor. And that's what I think they were thinking. But it was interesting because I had that time, me and Dr. Google were friends, and they never told me it was cancerous. They never told me it was malignant. They never told me most likely I would have a year to live. They never told me any of that. They basically sent me home, said, really successful surgery. Everything looks good. You're young and healthy, no problem. You got this. Then I go home and find out they didn't tell me anything for real. And I find this to be really common. And I think it's really misleading when people are given, well, you should do chemo and you should do radiation, or you should do this or you should do that. The important question that I didn't know to ask, which Dr. Nasha taught me to ask, is given a similar person with a similar diagnosis, similar surgery, similar tumor, how many of those people are alive in 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Because when you ask that question of your oncology team, they have to answer it, for one, because oftentimes they're just trying to be nice and trying to be positive. But then you want to ask that question, if you do this kind of treatment or don't do this type of treatment, what are my outcomes going to be? And statistically, for my type of tumor, you live 75% of a shorter life with chemo and radiation than you do if you did nothing at all but surgery. Now, every cancer is different, but given those statistics, they kept telling me things like, oh, we have a lot of success with this type of tumor. Well, it turns out success in the medical world means that you live 1 day past your expected death. That could even be 1 minute past your expected death. So if you're expected to live 18 months and you live 18 months and 1 hour, then that goes down in the medical books as this was a successful surgery, radio, chemotherapy protocol.
Okay.
So, that really was misleading to me because they kept throwing out, success. And they do that to terminal malignant patients like myself every day. And the problem is they know what success means, but they don't tell us. I don't know if they assume we know or they don't want to tell us how fatal our condition is.
Yeah, I guess it's twofold, where they have their own medical definition of the word success,
right.
But they're also trying to maybe instill hope in a very dire situation to people. They're trying to, yeah. But that's good information already, I think, for people to hear stories. Because personally, we've in our family we've got a friend who got. She had breast cancer, and now she got diagnosed with brain cancer, and she did I believe the radiotherapy, and then she's had a stroke from the radiotherapy now. And I saw this is before I knew all your full story, but I did already say to her then, please just look deeper into, say, the ketogenic diet and options there. And that's also another story, reason why I wanted to also get you on, because I'd love for anyone who's going through a similar situation like you did, or a family member who's got someone who's going through that, just to be a little bit more empowered with some knowledge that you could share about the situation. And I think you've shared some amazing stuff that they should be asking their oncology team. So I'm envisioning now, so you've just had this major surgery, your husband brought you home to recover from this, and then you said you managed to, you started a vegan diet, which was unfortunately slightly naturally higher in natural sugars, and then you got onto your functional medicine doctor, and she immediately put you on a ketogenic diet, did she?
She did.
Yeah.
And she said, every person's different and every cancer is different, which is why her approach really resonated to me. I think there was a group of 12 of us that were having this 4-day retreat with her. And she would bring out examples and be like, this is one person's blood work. And this is where their inflammation is high. And this is where their blood sugar is high. But, everybody's blood work was different and everybody's DNA was different. So there wasn't like a cancer diet. It was more like we need anti-inflammation diet for everybody. And different types of cancers have different appetites for sugar, like pancreatic and brain cancer are the highest appetite for sugar. And then you have a lot of like breast cancers, a lot of times are driven by high estrogen. Other cancers are a lot of times driven by high environmental toxins like leukemia. And so you really need to, what I loved about her immediately was like, these are your statistics and these are the reasons that you got cancer. And so this is how we're going to reverse them one by one. And I just love that. I'm a science girl. I didn't want like hippy dippy, oovy groovy approach, although I believe in all that for support. I wanted to see on paper that I was more healthy than I was last month and that would keep progressing. And it's fascinating because I do have like vegetarian, vegan, paleo, keto, you can see the difference in my body as the changes are implemented, but we really have to get away from the one size fits all, like cancer diet thought. Ketogenic diet, if anybody tries it, it's certainly going to lower your blood glucose, which is going to decrease the availability of sugar for cancer cells because cancer cells are metabolically inflexible. They're broken cells. Their mitochondria is damaged. And so those cancer cells can only ferment glucose. So the interesting tidbit I've heard many times is that we have 5 grams of sugar in our bloodstream at any given time. And so what the ketogenic diet does, which is so amazing, if you do a therapeutic ketogenic diet, which is not the ketogenic diet for weight loss or bodybuilding, it's really important to make that difference. We're trying to mimic having not more than 5 grams of sugar in the blood, which is, I believe, what nature intended.
Yeah, and I remember from your one talk, you said it was 5 grams of total carbs, not net carbs.
So I do 20 grams of total carbs.
Okay.
Which should yield my blood sugar content staying in like around 65, my fasting blood sugar.
Okay. So that is one of your main sort of biomarkers that you're going after is checking your glucose level, and especially postprandial. So after eating too, you want to make sure that, do you get into that kind of testing?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm a numbers geek again, fellow biohacker. So, I test my blood ketones. There's a new test that I just got in the mail called Keto Mojo, which is a new test for serum blood ketones and also serum glucose. Okay. And the test strips that I've had to buy for the last 5 years were $5 each. And so that was really hard on my client's budget, on my budget. But these new test strips are only 99 cents. So it's going to be a game changer. And
that measures both glucose?
Yeah, both blood glucose. And so the magic for me, I use blood glucose to test my reaction to a certain food. Like, let's say you ate coconut cream, which a lot of ketogenic recipes have coconut cream in it, the fatty part at the top of coconut milk. Mm-hmm. And you'll metabolize that as pure fat. do to the testing with your serum glucose. You're going to test 2 hours after you ate that item. For me, anything that involves coconut drives my blood sugar wild. And so without testing for, your metabolic differences, that's how I use glucose testing. People use it in different ways, but that's one of the main reasons I use either that or a breath ketone tester. Does the same kind of thing. And then I test at about 6 o'clock every night, which is 6 hours after my lunch meal, is when I test serum blood ketones every day.
So you keep your ketone measurement time the same every day?
And I basically do 6 hours after my midday meal.
Okay.
Because what I want to do is test my food reaction to that meal. And then also I use blood ketones as kind of like your overall barometer of how you're doing. Because you can have low blood glucose and you can have good acetoacetate on your breath tester, and your blood ketones are not high. You've got to have all of them be in a good range.
I did. I had Michelle Lindell from Ketonics on, which is the measuring tool you were mentioning, and he did say how he found it's not a linear graph, so it's not as if your blood ketone levels, your beta hydroxybutyrate goes up, and therefore your breath ketones go up at the same time. It's that he feels that as you become more ketogenic, that you could actually become more efficient with the blood ketones, so you can actually have what looks like low blood ketone levels, but you're actually in a good state of ketosis because you could see that through your breath acetone. So
exactly.
you found the exact. That's why I found fascinating. You found the same results, didn't you?
Oh, definitely. And what I really stress to people is that being in ketosis or therapeutic ketosis for cancer has to be high beta hydroxybutyrate, which is the blood ketones. Then it has to be high acetoacetate, which is, testing with ketonics, with breath ketones. And then also low serum glucose, because you can actually have the first two without low serum glucose. Because if you have high ketones, but you also have high glucose, something's off in your diet, and there's enough sugar still to be fed to those cancer cells. And vice versa for those three. And then there's two other legs of the five-legged stool, I call it, which is really food quality for cancer has to be paramount. So the fourth leg is that you've got to have really high, good ketone inducing fats, and most people are not eating enough fat. And then you've also got to have high quality vegetables that are building the antioxidants and the polyphenols to rebuild the healthy cells. And you also have to make sure they're non-toxic, they're organic. And then a lot of people miss their water source. And so an easy way for those that are in the US, I don't know if you have this yet, is ewg.org. You can click on the National Tap Water Database, and you can see all the carcinogens in your water. So really getting a good water filter is paramount.
Yeah, I'd agree. Luckily, where I live, I'm on a little island, and so we don't have fluoride, and they don't play too much with our water. But we use a home water filtration system too, because municipal water or government water, it's up to a standard. But as you're saying, you actually want a higher standard of your drinking water too, to make sure that you can remove a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing what's in our water. When that database came out, it's petrifying. It'll show you how many carcinogens are in your water, today.
Yeah, unfortunately,
no wonder we're so sick.
I read a recent article. Again, I think this was in the US to do with 3M, and it was a particular chemical that they were dumping into water supply, and it's how profuse it is across the west coast of the States, I believe it was, and the case, it was a lawyer story. So you want to take care of your water.
Take care of your water and really know where your food came from and who grew it and what they put on it. As a farmer, I can't stress this enough, is buying blindly your food these days is not a good idea. You really want to talk face to face with who raised your meat and who raised your vegetables and know how they did it.
Yeah. So that's the one question I want to ask, because so you were vegetarian for a long time and you went vegan. You eat meat now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So everybody's different. This is a great example of genetic variability. When I had my blood tested, my ferritin is really, really low. And we could do a whole segment on leaky gut, but almost every single person with cancer has either low ferritin, super leaky gut, or they still have leaky gut, but it's masked by either a genetic condition called genetic hemochromatosis, which is over absorption of iron in the body, which originated from the Irish potato famine. I don't know if you know that.
No, it did not.
So my husband has genetic hemochromatosis from his Irish heritage. And so he needs to eat like almost zero red meat and stick to eggs, chicken, turkey, and fish because his body stores ferritin. My body does not store ferritin, and I can eat red meat every day. So we really can't go back to this personalization thing, is the diet needs to be made like based on everybody's blood work and see how their vitamin D3 is, how their calcium levels are, how their ferritin level is, how is their immune system functioning. Do they have high heavy metals in their body? You can see all these markers, but Dr. Nasha is a wizard. She has determined how to determine if you have things like B6 deficiency and B12 deficiency, because if you take a B12 test is circulating B12 in your bloodstream. Well, circulating B12 in our bloodstream doesn't help anybody. We want to know how it gets into the cells. So she looks at MCV, MCHC, and MCH, 3 tests in your standard CBC, CMP blood work that you get at a health fair will show you how that uptake of the B12 is going into the cells. And 9 out of 10 times we find that people were born, when we do their DNA test, we're born without basically the receptor for vitamin B12. It can float around the body, but it won't go into the cells.
Okay.
So any vegetarian who has that deficiency is going to be in a big quandary, right?
Mm-hmm. And so do you find you need to take B12 injections?
No, I don't. So I was only born with half from my mother or my father. You can't tell on the test of the gene that allows for the absorption of vitamin B12. I have to take a specific type of B12 because of my genetic mutation. So I have to take the hydroxy form of B12. And so a lot of people are taking cyanocobalamin or methylcobalamin. Every single person is different. 1, do they have the genetic mutation for B12? 2, is it expressing itself in their blood work? 3, what type of B12 should you take based on what your genes say? And so all the supplements that I take basically now are things that I was like born without. So like I was born without the receptor for vitamin D3 from my mother and my father. I was born without any enzymes to manufacture, to process folic acid. So I have to take 5-methylfolate every day. Actually eating kale and broccoli, which should be very carcinogenic, were actually causing me to grow tumor cells in my body, possibly because I had an inability to process what's in those products. It's a sulfur gene processing problem.
Wow. So you just said that you found 2 particular vegetables you can't eat because they actually are...
I couldn't eat them in the beginning. And there's a long list of foods that contain sulfur. Sulfur is essential for the body to carry waste products out. It basically helps take out the trash. So if you drink toxic drinking water, then, you eat some sulfur foods, which is why kale and broccoli are so amazing. They pull those toxins, they dump them into the urine stream, and they go bye-bye. What happens when you have my mutation, which is called a CBS mutation, your body doesn't do that correctly because it's missing 5-methylfolate. Normal people will convert folic acid to 5-methylfolate, and then there's a chemical. It's too long to get into.
Mm-hmm.
But my body was not taking out the trash. And if you look at people's bodies who have this enzyme, they have a lot of neurological problems. You see this gene a lot in autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and brain cancer.
So what I'm hearing here is a lot of complicated chemical pathways that in reality a normal person is not going to be able to sort of know. And this is where a functional medicine doctor like yours, or what you've trained yourself to do now, is going to be more necessary. You're going to need that level of coaching, I can see.
Yeah, it's very hard. I have searched the world over for another doctor like my Dr. Nasha, and she probably doesn't want any more business either. But almost nobody is cross-referencing the way she reads blood work with the client history with DNA. And I actually don't know any keto diet coaches. I need to train like 100 of them that can read the blood work and the DNA as well, because it's just as important to cater the cancer treatment to the person as it is to cater the ketogenic diet to the person. And no normal person should understand anything that I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important that this is a scientific process, and we stop doing this like guessing game, like, oh, I have this, I should do this, Sure, it's not going to hurt you to attempt the ketogenic diet yourself. But if you have a glioblastoma, brain cancer, and you don't have the benefit of time, you're going to want to.
Yeah, you bring out the nuclear guns. You try hit it with everything.
They do hit it with everything, and it's very difficult to watch someone to go down that pathway because they're not the same person when they're done with that treatment.
Yeah, with the radiotherapy.
The radiotherapy to the head is a really different animal, and
so you've never had that again. You've never had to experience
my family was trying to talk me into it, and I think what saved me was my spreadsheet, which maybe you saw in some of the presentations, which was showing like you could literally watch the mitochondrial repair happen in front of your very eyes. You could watch my inflammation coming down. You could watch my blood sugar coming down. You could watch my kidneys start to function. You could watch my leaky gut being healed. Like, it was all there. And my doctors were like, what are you doing? Like, this is amazing. Like, blood work doesn't change like this. And I'm like, I know you guys can't talk about it because anybody with an AMA, an American Medical Association license, if they talk about the ketogenic diet in their office, they can lose their license in the United States.
Wow.
So, I can't talk with this, with most of my orchestra. I leave out critical information, but, I keep my orchestra. It's good to have everybody on board,
Yeah, I'm sure the oncologist who had to do the neurosurgeon who had to do your brain surgery, he must be blown away you're still here to this day.
Yeah, they keep calling me to come in and get a PET scan, and this year they stopped calling me because I was so freaked out by my PET scan that I now use thermograms to track cancer, any potential cancer or hot spots in the rest of my body. And it's really amazing. Like, I went keto for cancer, but I had no idea that I had all these other health problems. Like, I didn't know I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. I didn't know I had Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I knew I had breast fibroids and that they were, mammogramming the living daylights out of me, giving me lots of radiation for that. All those things disappeared, and it was kind of mind-blowing because all of my doctors, whether it's an endocrinologist or, they all say that PCOS is irreversible. Hashimoto's is irreversible. You're going to be on drugs for the rest of your life. And then they're like, wow, it's gone. How is that possible? Like, that's why I'm hooked on the ketogenic diet. I mean, not just to, conquer cancer, but, really to prevent all these major diseases of modern insanity.
And so have you, I guess you've tweaked your keto diets, because I did actually have, there's an organization in the UK, Matthew's Friends.
Yeah.
There's a lady called Emma Williams, and she
I met her. Mm-hmm.
and so Emma shared with us how with Matthew and children with epilepsy, that they'll put them on a very strict therapeutic ketogenic diet, so quite low in protein, very, very high in fat, but they'll only do that for a period of time, and then you don't have to stay in that state forever. Have you found the same with brain cancer, that do you still have to be in a very strict therapeutic range where, like the epilepsy treatment, or is that for a period of time and then you wean back a bit so it's not so strict?
Through a lot of experience, not just with myself, but with other people, especially sugar-loving cancers like brain cancer. I can't tell you how many people have gone, like, relaxed their diet to, like, I'm going to eat sweet potatoes. And a lot of times the tumors came back within a month of doing that.
Wow.
So yeah, no relaxing, because it's interesting. I track my lab so closely every month. So I do have a chance to, like, experiment with a couple things. Oh, well, I experiment like crazy on myself. But like yesterday, I had 3 bites of purple potatoes because I just wanted to see what would happen. And my fasting blood glucose was 66 in the morning. Normally, after eating keto, even my keto ice cream, all my yummy stuff, my blood sugar will stay below 79. 3 bites of potatoes and my blood sugar went to 114. Okay. So my body just cannot process even small amounts of sugar. And that could be my DNA, but it could also be that we were never designed to have large amounts of carbohydrates all the time. I mean, you look at history, we haven't been eating grains for very long. We haven't been farming for very long. When I'm out hunting and I'm in the woods and I'm gathering foods and living off the land, I'm not eating carbohydrates. You can't find giant purple potatoes in the woods, right? So I do think part of it is our evolution. And then somebody had a great saying at KetoCon, I think, was, we're being bombarded by hormones, estrogens, endocrine disruptors, toxic chemicals every day. They're saying if you just wake up in the morning and go to the bank, the post office, and the grocery store and come back, you've been exposed to between 100 and 200 chemicals in that short trip. I don't think our bodies are completely overwhelmed now. And unfortunately, I ate like a traditional carboholic for 48 years. So what I'm doing is undoing 48 years of damage to my body, which is why I think I have to be so strict. Mm. The other thing is we have, I can't remember the statistic of how many circulating cancer cells a normal healthy human has. It's in the millions. And so everybody has cancer. And so I think about that a lot. And I think our stem cells produce somewhere between 500 and 2,000 cancer cells every day. Cancer is part of our life. So what we do in any given day can give cancer cells that opportunity or not. And the problem with all these toxins in our food and air and water is that those cancer cells have a lot of continuous opportunity. And so we have to kind of undo that part, which is what the ketogenic diet does so brilliantly. I'll never forget when I finally got my ketones, in the 3 to 7 range, which is what I do for, my type of cancer or anybody else with metastatic, severe cancers. You want to have the ketones quite high. First, I went through the keto flu, which sucks. Everybody, it's awful. But then I went through a crazy, like almost a month of like a detox process of when the fat is high and the glucose is low, all those cells that I've been storing crap in for 48 years, literally insulin is gatekeeper. So when insulin comes down and those old cells open, all the stuff comes flooding out, estrogen, mercury, you name it. And so I felt really terrible. And I see this happen with a lot of my clients is we're literally detoxing with the ketogenic diet, which is something we can't do even on the paleo diet, which is why I think I wasn't seeing the results on the paleo diet is I had been drinking toxic drinking water for 25 years and that needed to come out of my body. And so it took, all my scans didn't show that much progress when I was eating only 1 cup of fat a day. It really took when I got to like 2.5 cups of fat a day and my glucose got really low, my ketones got really high, that all those toxins had a chance to get out.
And do you do fasting too?
I do intermittent fasting, still drinking tea with very miserable for me because I had the gene that doesn't process caffeine. So
oh, no.
I can cry about that almost every day. But I do allow myself a little bit of decaf coffee ice cream every now and then. So that's my treat. But yeah, I don't eat until my first meal about 12 or 1 every day. And then I try to get all my food into a 6-hour window. So try to have the first meal 12 or 1, second meal 6 o'clock or so. And so then fasting in the morning, fasting in the evening. Whenever I'm traveling, I've just found that when I'm in the airport, it's easier to just do like a long fast while traveling because I have so much trouble in security that I now pack 3 coolers in my check-in luggage with all my fats. And I freeze them and I check them on the airline. And then I have a nice light carry-on, go for a fast while I'm flying, and then I gorge on fat when I get there.
Okay. Yeah, because I saw that you're also keen on circadian rhythms.
It's one of NATIA's top 10, we've got hormones, thyroid, circadian rhythms, waking up with the sun and going to bed with the sun, like that. Even though I'm a farmer, I was always a night owl. And I really had to change that because our body is designed to, do what Laura Ingalls Wilder did on Little House on the Prairie, and what I've really noticed is a change in my sleep quality and how I feel, my energy level. And I think probably the most mind-blowing change I've had is actually through reducing my cortisol by starting meditation. And that happened on year 4. And my blood sugar was actually going up because my cortisol was going up, which was driving my insulin up, even though I was eating ketogenic perfectly. And my doctor was like, I've been telling you this for 4 years, it's time to buck up. And so I finally did start in 4 weeks of meditation. My cortisol dropped in half, my insulin dropped, my HbA1c dropped, and my blood sugar dropped.
So how did you meditate to do that? Because it's not just sitting there quietly, is it? And
no, everybody's
and you think,
different. The two things that work for me, I go to 2 different meditation classes, one on Monday nights and one on Tuesday nights. So having someone that can guide you and give you inspiration is really helpful. And, it's like finding a good yoga teacher. You have to find the right fit for you. Some people don't like instruction. Some people would rather listen to an app on their phone. I don't use a cell phone anymore because I got my tumor right where my cell phone was. So cell phone is just for emergency purposes only, or I can turn on the map function or make a call from very far away. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I use another app that I can do in airplane mode on my phone called HeartMath. And it's a little thing that clips onto my ear. Have you seen it before? It's a biofeedback.
Yeah, I've got one. I've got the older unit where you can put your thumb on, or you get the ear clip. Yeah.
So that's been really good. I mean, I think you just got to try everything, and you just watch your cortisol. And all of a sudden, when your cortisol comes down, then you found what's right for you.
And that I love that part of what you're saying here, because a lot of people just latch onto one aspect, like the diet, for example. But that, as you mentioned earlier, that's just one layer of the onion of the story. Exactly. And a big part this your story there with the meditation sort of reminds me of when Malcolm Gladwell was talking about, I believe it was the village Rosetta or Roswell, one of the two. But that was, I don't know if you know that story where he was saying,
No.
so that with that one, it was, I tried to do it quickly, but it was an Italian families that came from Italy to America for a better life, but they split in two. So one half of the Italian group went up into the mountains, created their own village. One half stayed down in the typical town, and the GPs, the family doctors down in the town, said they never saw any men from the village with heart disease, but they used to see the men in the town with heart disease, and they could never understand why there was a difference. And they did this big research project, and when they whittled it all down, they said it wasn't the diet, because they both ate American diets now. It wasn't because they didn't smoke, because they both were smoking. Or the only factor was the men in the village still lived the Italian life of the mamas, the papas, and they socialized. So for me, what that told me was that level of happiness, that mental aspect, has a massive metabolic effect on the body. And like what you're doing there with, you're dealing with that. And so to get your cortisol levels down and your insulin control and your glucose was actually that sort of mindfulness, that meditation, whatever it is, to get you in a mentally happier space too.
Yeah. I mean, they always say stress can kill you, but they never say how. So it's really interesting to look at the how. And the other interesting component of cancer is not just, we have like stress, biorhythms, sleep all together. And Naisha has emotional well-being as another entire chapter of cancer, because it's amazing how much grief and loss and abuse factor into a lot of cancers. So unresolved something in our past can really drive metastasis of cancer. And we've seen this happen over and over again. Everybody will have like the perfect diet. They're meditating, they're, exercising and walking, but they're not exercising too much. They've resolved all these things in their life, and there's just an elephant in the living room. And it's really important, like, to have no stone unturned. And there were a lot of stones I didn't want to turn over in my own cancer process. And, I went and did EFT, if anybody knows, the little tapping technique. And
how did you find that?
Naisha, my doctor, she was like, "You need EFT." And I'm like, "What's EFT?" And she's like, "Go figure it out." So, and it was great because I think I'd had a lot of psychotherapy for, my past traumas, but I'd never really processed them emotionally. And somehow EFT is great because you can feel the emotion like it's happening. Like, I remember being 9 years old, locked in this bathroom, crying and being traumatized. And when I did EFT, I was like in that person, my body, like at 9 years old. It sounds crazy, but I felt the emotions like so strongly for the first time since I was 9. And then through the end of the EFT process, at the end of every session, you choose to let go of that feeling and move on and say, I am a good person. I love myself and this and that. And I think some type of process to clear those type of things from your life is critical for cancer.
Yeah, I definitely want to get someone on who knows about tapping, because from what I've seen externally, it's incredible what some of the results people get when they're just tapping on themselves repeatedly and repeating a word, and then they break down.
You would never imagine, and it melts down even like tough people like me. So
yeah, and then you touched a bit on how you were an extreme sport person, and even that you found you had to biohack and actually peel back and back off because it was affecting your body negatively.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was October after my diagnosis. I had my brain surgery in July. And I think this happens to almost everybody I see with cancer is we get the diagnosis, we're devastated, we decide on a treatment plan, and then we're like, okay, a couple months out, I'm going to go back to normal because that's all I want. And you're having a hard time with cancer. Cancer sucks, right? And you're grasping at what you used to have, because you're like, that's going to define whether you're better or whether you're not better. Because you kind of want to prove to everybody, hey, look at me, I've conquered cancer. And so in October, which was so July, August, September, October, 4 months after my surgery, I decided I would start running again. And the doctor told, even my neurologist and oncologist told me not to run, that it was bad for my tumor. And Dr. Nasha, of course, was like, don't do that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do that anyway, because that's what I do. I'm completely defined by what I do. And I went out and did like a couple really easy jogs and got my blood work that month. And it was absolutely terrible. All my inflammation markers went back up. HSCRP, the heart disease marker, lactate dehydrogenase, sedimentation rates. Even my blood sugar went up, and I couldn't figure out why. And now I know why, because when you get sore, that's lactic acid. And lactic acid, guess what it converts to? Sugar. So every time you exercise and you're sore, you're feeding potential cancer cells. So what I do is I exercise like a pregnant person, is what I call it now. I'm always able to chat. I wear a Fitbit and I keep my heart rate below 100, whereas before I was trying to, peg it. I don't do any chronic cardio anymore. I finally, at about year 2, I realized that I was an addict to exercise in the way that people are an addict to heroin or carbohydrates. And so what's great about the ketogenic diet is, I can eat my keto ice cream fat bomb every day. I can have all these great treats, and my weight, I've always struggled with my weight my whole life. And I use exercise to keep my weight in check so I could eat all those carbs. Now I can just walk the dogs every day. People can do some high intensity interval training, like 12 minutes, 3 times a week. That's been shown to very, very anti-carcinogenic and anti-inflammatory. But, we weren't meant to be on an exercise bicycle in a gym, going away like a rat in a cage. So,
yeah, I think it feeds back into that stress cycle. You sort of,
absolutely.
Not only physically, but as you said, you were trying to deal with something. You're using the physical to deal with something mental too. So
exactly.
there was a deeper picture there.
Yeah. I think I was always just insecure with myself, and I was this fat, dorky math geek biohacker that became like this world champion extreme skier to prove to everybody else that I was okay. And I think what's the most amazing gift about cancer is I found this like new normal, like right in the middle, that's just so beautiful and so much more peaceful. And I can do one thing at a time now. And I enjoy like the little moments in life. Everything is just really special, and it's slower and more even and balanced. And I never had that. It was always just one or the other.
Yeah. So we're coming up onto our time here, I can see. I think you've shared so many good points, from the basic symptoms to the treatment to your sort of, let's call it alternates, because compared to the mainstream medical approach.
Futuristic.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, your futuristic approach. And yeah, you've only just touched on some of the aspects, and there's so much more. Now, I know that you do coaching, but you're swamped and you can't take on any more clients really. But if anyone wants to follow you in any way, what are the best resources, the best online resources to keep in touch with what you're up to?
I'm Cooking to Conquer Cancer on Facebook. That's a great way to follow my rants and ravings on the keto diet. What are some, ketogenic diet resource, and it's ketogenic-diet-resource.com is a great worldwide resource that kind of talks about the ketogenic diet. You can click on cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease. You can click on each different thing, and it'll give you the whole science behind how it works and why in that particular application. I love that website. Optimal Terrain Consulting is my doctor's website, Dr. Nasha Winters. She has so many resources on there. She has links to doctors that people can contact in their own area, because you do need a really good team. And it can be your oncologist, it can be your GP, it can be your radiologist, all those people. Then, add Dr. Nasha, and then add a good functional medicine or an integrative medicine person that's near you that can help guide you in. Because when you get your report from Dr. Nasha and it's like 70 pages long, you're like, oh, what am I going to do? This is a lot. So you want help from your friends and your family. And as far as the ketogenic diet goes, there's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet, because it's almost always ketogenic for weight loss or strength training, which is between 65 and 75% fat, sorry. Ketogenic diet for cancer has to be at 85% or higher for carbs, with much higher quantities of healthy, organic and, really good keto fats and a variety of keto fats and a variety of vegetables. You can't just eat the same thing every day. We really emphasize trying to get 4 to even 9 cups of vegetables a day into the ketogenic diet for cancer, the way Dr. Nasha and I do it, because we believe rebuilding the healthy body is as important as conquering the cancer cells. And so a great way to track that is chronometer.com, CRONOMETER, chronometer.com. And then you can adjust the settings so that it says high fat, ketogenic, and then adjust the settings so that it says rigorous as your default setting. And I tell you, if people are using Chronometer and they're using it correctly and they're ketone testing and blood glucose testing, I tell you, testing is what makes the difference. Tracking is what makes the difference. This is cancer we're talking about, and we can't do any guessing. Guessing doesn't work when it comes to cancer.
Yeah. And do you have a ketogenic cookbook or anything that you...
I don't. I've been asked to do one, but I'm worried about my cortisol levels.
Okay.
So I do have a lot of recipes that I have invented. I would suggest, since my cookbook's not out yet, it will be someday, Maria Emmerich's cookbooks, especially the 30-day ketogenic cleanse, is really good because it doesn't have dairy. The reason most people, when we test their IGF-1, which is a growth factor that shows up high for a lot of cancers, if it's over 100, then we want people off dairy. And I would say about 85% of people have high IGF-1. So if you're the lucky person and yours is below 100, then you can eat dairy, high fat, no carb dairy. But if you can't, then, Maria Emmerich's book is great, it's really awesome to be able to make ice cream. I have a genetic mutation, so I can't eat coconut oil. So I had to make a new kind of ice cream that was dairy-free and coconut-free, which...
high in fat.
And high in fat, so...
Yeah, interesting.
So you gotta, her cookbooks are amazing. She's really been a mentor for me. But again, a lot of that stuff is for weight loss. So you want to disregard the part about calories being, whatever low. You want to put in Chronometer, I want to gain weight, maintain weight, or lose weight.
Mm.
And if I do have any space for people, they can contact me at AlisonGannett.com. At least you can see my videos and my story, and maybe inspire some of your relatives that aren't quite there yet. And Miriam Kalmian is an incredible keto diet coach. She can be found online. And also Remission Nutrition, I think it's .com. She co-authored the book, Jess Kelly with Dr. Nasha Winters, which is The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. So there's 3 good diet coaches for people out there. And what was I going to say? It was something. Oh, yeah. So if you're lost about ketogenic diet, tripping over the truth, is a great book about why the ketogenic diet works as far as the science goes. And then the book I just mentioned, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, that's what Jess Kelly and Dr. Nasha Winters wrote together. And it talks about the 10 different areas that drive cancer. And I think we've talked about so many today, and I really appreciate you bringing those up, because I think a lot of people don't really understand that, how important it is.
Yeah, and I think your analogy again with the onion, I tend to use a bucket analogy where you're pouring in lots of parts into the bucket, and so it's like a pie chart, and you've got to think about that. So it's not just one singular element to this.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I guess maybe just one last one was support-wise. So I can imagine. I mean, when you get a cancer diagnosis like yours, things move fast. So as in your situation, you had the surgery done to remove the mass, but then I think nowadays most people are going to turn to like a Facebook group or something. Have you found that there's sort of like a keto brain cancer support group, Facebook group or something? Or do you stay clear of those?
I find there's so much misinformation out there that I find that if I'm on the Facebook groups, I'm saying, hey, you guys are missing the point here. So, Dr. Nasha is my guru. I think when I first discovered her, I had, maybe 20 different approaches to cancer that I could have passed, that I could have gone down. And what spoke to me about her was her comprehensiveness, and then also the fact that I was tracking my life and knowing what was happening to my body. And she was like, I'm going to teach you how to read your labs so that you don't need me anymore. And then I loved reading labs so much. She was like, do you want to come do this for a living? And I was like, sure, train me. I want to be inside your brain. So I really love training with her. And I think giving people, cancer is a process. So cancer doesn't just happen one day and then just get fixed one day. It takes time to happen, and it takes time to fix. And I know, luckily, I had the gift of time because I was recovering from surgery. But when people are recovering from surgery, because most people can, take a deep breath, order some books, make an appointment with Dr. Nasha, find a ketogenic diet coach. You have time. The doctors, ask them that question that we talked about in the beginning of this show. You have time to do some research. Chemos, whether you have chemo on Tuesday or 2 weeks from Tuesday, cancer doesn't really care if you're starving those cancer cells.
Yeah, great point.
Put the power in your own hands. I think if I wasn't tracking my labs and I didn't see those things that I needed to tweak, I would feel really vulnerable, and that I would just go in for those MRIs like, oh gosh, what's going to happen? Is the cancer going to be back? I go into my MRIs now thinking about surfing on vacation, because I know what the MRI is going to say, because I know what my labs look like.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's such a great mindset to come back now. So you do still have regular scans to monitor what's happening in your brain. But I think most people would just latch onto that and only focus on that as a major parameter. But you then decided, right, that's just one part, but I need to focus on these other elements that are actually going to get me better, rather than just looking at...
if you're not tracking how your mitochondria is doing and how your inflammation's doing, and how your ketones are doing, you're just playing Russian roulette. You don't want to give cancer that opportunity. You want to have the power in your own hands to track your own health. And I think the best part about the ketogenic diet that we didn't talk about is if I had a choice to choose any diet in the world right now, I would choose the keto diet, because I feel so good. My health problems are all gone. A benefit with the brain cancer not happening. And it tastes so good, and it really, thanks to people like Maria Emmerich with, creating recipes that are delicious, so that we can, thrive on this diet and not be deprived of pizza and ice cream.
Yeah. Alison, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge bombs about cancer today. But also, I don't know if anyone said to you, but just well done on what you've achieved. And it's going to sound, I guess, weird, but well done for living so long after such a terminal diagnosis.
Well, that's what my doctors would like to say, but they never can say.
Because it's stories like yours that inspire people, and that's why I hope I can help in any way, just to share your story to other people who may be in your similar situation, to empower them with a bit more information that they can make a better decision in the situation that they're in.
Exactly. And that's why, my check engine light has been on my whole life, and I just kept putting tape over it. And, you finally get the big C word, and then it's like, okay, now I've got a deal. And, it is a blessing. I had a lot of things I needed to fix in my life, and my life is 100% better than it used to be. And cancer really has been a gift.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you again for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.